The following is a community affairs presentation from the Ulster County Health Department. This is the Healthy Ulster Radio Show, a weekly presentation exploring community health and sustainability with guests representing a broad spectrum of community partners working to make Ulster County the healthiest in New York State. This program is sponsored by the Health Alliance of the Hudson Valley in Kingston, a member of the WMC Health Network.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Healthy Ulster Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Carol Smith, Ulster County Commissioner of Health and Mental Health. With me today is my co-host, Vin Martello, Director of Community Health Relations. Good morning, Vin.
Good morning, Dr. Smith. Our listeners know that we talk with guests and experts from a wide array of organizations and professions that influence the health and sustainability of our community. And today, we'll be talking about a subject that is essential to all communities and to all living things, clean water, and what people can do to protect and preserve it.
Our guest today is Dan Shapley. Dan is Water Quality Manager for Riverkeeper. Riverkeeper is one of our nation's leading environmental organizations dedicated to protecting the environmental, recreational, commercial integrity and beauty of the Hudson River and its tributaries, and to safeguarding the drinking water of 9 million New York City and Hudson Valley residents. Good morning and welcome, Dan.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Dan, tell our listeners about Riverkeeper. What does it do? How did it come into being, and who's involved?
Well, this is a great time to have the conversation because Riverkeeper actually turns 50 years old this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't been with it 50 years, but we have been working for 50 years, as you said, to protect the Hudson River. And the organization started really with fishermen down in the Westchester County area who at that time in 1966 were really just fed up with the conditions that they found in the Hudson River and looked for ways that they as citizens could make a difference. And the real innovation that they brought to the environmental movement was to really use the laws that are on the books that citizens have the right to enforce. So that at the time was before the Clean Water Act, but now has become the Clean Water Act in many ways and other environmental laws. So that's really at the heart of what Riverkeeper does, is understand what the laws are and what our rights as citizens are to enforce them and see that they are carried out.
And what's your background? How did you get involved in environmental work and making your life's work protection of the Hudson River?
Well, I grew up in Dutchess County on the Wappinger Creek, and my parents' home is backs up on a little woods, and behind that woods was the creek, and that was my playground. So I really came to the environment as a person who just loved to be outside. And I was thinking about it just the other day that's still what I like to do when I have a chance to play. I look for a trail to get on. I look for water to be beside. The other thing that really made a profound influence on me was my parents took us every Columbus Day weekend to the to hike the trails at the Mohawk Preserve and the Mohawk Mountain House, and that landscape here in Ulster County really inspired me and kind of gave me my vision for what a wonderful experience outdoors could be. And then I went to college and came back to the community and was a reporter for the Poughkeepsie Journal for 7 or so years and covered the environment. So I really got to know a lot of the people in the movement here to protect the environment and a lot of the issues that are facing our region, and came to love all of it. You know, the science behind the issues, the people who are active, and of course it's my community. So I care deeply about what happens here.
Dan, some of our listeners know what a watershed is. For those who don't, can you explain what it is? What are the dynamics, and why is it important to protect our watersheds?
Sure. A watershed is really all of the land that channels water into a particular stream or a particular lake. So in the Hudson River, we have a really big watershed. It's something like 14,000 square miles, stretching out to the central part of the state and all the way up to the Adirondacks. But here on the local level, you can look at ever smaller scales and look at a small stream in your backyard and think of where are the high points around it, where all the water is ultimately reaching it. And remember also that water flows not only over the surface of the land in streams, and also flows underneath the land, and the groundwater flows usually generally in the same direction. Now, it's really important to think about protecting watersheds from a public health perspective for a number of reasons. One is that we all drink water, obviously. So all the water ultimately that we are drinking, and we have glasses here in front of us in the studio, this water is in some way shaped by all of our activities upstream. And whether you're getting water from a well or from a public water supply system, ultimately the protection of the watershed supplying that water is really critical to its quality. And we see that over and over again, where you have a well-protected watershed, you have high-quality water, and where you have a poorly protected watershed, you have threats to the drinking water quality. In addition to water quality for drinking, there's also recreation. So if we're out playing in the water, swimming or kayaking, or if even child, I have a 4-year-old, so I think about this all the time. Every puddle is a playground, and every stream, that's if the water is high quality, then you don't have to worry. If there's some pollution source upstream and your child's playing in it, then that's something that you'd worry about. So there's drinking water, recreation, and then some other issues would come in with flooding. Obviously could be a public health issue, and the quality of your watershed, the degree to which your wetlands are absorbing rainwater, or you have buffers on floodplains that are able to absorb some of the floodwaters, can be an issue of public health on a more of a kind of structural level, if you will.
And what are some of the specific things that Riverkeeper does to promote and protect our watersheds, and what are some of the more notable accomplishments and perhaps challenges?
Sure. I think that Riverkeeper's biggest accomplishment when it comes to watershed protection is all of our the shining example for all of us and around the world, which is New York City's drinking water supply. And Riverkeeper was one of the parties back in the 90s that brokered the agreement to preserve the drinking water supply in the Catskills as an unfiltered source of drinking water for all the people in New York City and communities like New Paltz that draw water from that same aqueduct system. So that model, that understanding of watersheds as being well protected if there's a lot of forested land, and the buffers along streams are well protected with natural vegetation, and farms are managing their wastes, and communities are managing their waste. Those kinds of principles are things that we like to see applied everywhere, because obviously New York City and the quality of drinking water there is not the only important endpoint for that water, but all of us wherever we live benefit from clean water.
Mm-hmm. And on the subject of water quality and watershed protection, some people might think that with the Clean Water Act and the environmental movement and all of the efforts that have been made, that our nation's rivers are much cleaner, so why do we need to be concerned?
Right.
What's going on?
Well, we certainly made tremendous progress, and Dr. Smith and I were just talking before the broadcast began about the tremendous progress that you see in the Hudson River, very notably, and other places where 40 or 50 years ago or more, we were thinking about all of these rivers as open sewers and treating them like open sewers, literally, with raw sewage from our communities and industrial wastes from factories and whatnot. So we've certainly come a long way from that point. What we find ourselves in today is, we still have a long way to go. And if you think about the longer sweep of time, even trying to get your hands around a problem such as we found ourselves 50 years ago, 50 years is not such a long time to be working on it. The state of our fish, if you look at the major fish stocks in the Hudson River as one example, are still at a fraction of the abundance that we once had, and we can't eat many of them because of contamination. So we, in our generation, really don't even understand the abundance that could be coming from our estuary, from this amazing, one of the greatest estuaries in the world. So we're still, these are long-term projects. You don't get toxic contaminants out of fish in a day. You don't restore their populations in a day. And when it comes to water quality, things like public infrastructure and the state of our sewers, we invested heavily a generation ago to get our water quality improved and to see those dramatic improvements. But, whereas a pothole will get 17 calls to the local mayor to fix, we don't see the holes in our pipes. And so we've suffered for years from a lack of investment because of a lack of awareness that our infrastructure underground has really been eroding beneath our feet. And now we're faced with a bigger bill because we haven't maintained that as well as we should have over years. And that's one of the big issues we face today with particularly with recreational water quality, is improving the quality of our piping systems and our treatment plants to get them back up to standards we even had them at in many cases 30 or 40 years ago.
Would it be fair to say that we've addressed most of the major sources of pollution, and now the threat is coming from 1,000 places, as in, death by 1,000 cuts? And
it's certainly with many types of pollution now, that is definitely the story. We have, as we talked about, these vast areas of watersheds and the types of pollution that can affect them. You have on the Wallkill River, for instance, in New Paltz, just last year, there was what we believe to be a harmful algal bloom, which is a technical term for a blue-green algae type of blue-green algae that can produce toxins. And generally the causes of this kind of toxic algae bloom are an overload of nutrients into a waterway, and as well as stagnant water and hot temperatures. So the sources of nutrients are exactly what you're talking about typically. It's someone applying fertilizer on their lawn here, and it's runoff from a farm there, and it's the sewer discharges here, and you add that all up and you come up with a total that is overwhelming a river. So in that case, then you could actually have the river itself, by producing this algae and the algae producing toxins, flowing downstream and affecting someone's drinking water downstream from that. So there can be a whole cascade of effects, and as you said, it starts in many different places, and often with small sources in each individual case, but they can add up to a very significant problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a few years back, I was down in Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay, which is one of the world's most prolific shellfish breeding grounds. And they were talking about pollution coming from poultry farms all the way in Pennsylvania. That's how big the watershed that feeds into that basin. Yeah. So when you think about the Hudson River and you think about its length and the hundreds of tributaries that flow into it, and municipal sewage pipes and industrial pipes and all manner of things, it's got to be a daunting challenge at times.
Yeah, and I'll double down on that one, even a little bit, in that the Susquehanna River, which flows through Oneonta and the part of the Catskills on the other side of our watershed, flows into the Chesapeake as well. So some of those farms you're talking about are actually in New York State as well. That we're in the Chesapeake watershed, just a couple counties over. In the Hudson River watershed, as you said, we have a tremendous load of nutrients from sewage and from farms. We have the advantage over the Chesapeake in the natural kind of flow and flush of the river, that we don't have some of the same problems that they have with that overload of nutrients, but we have the same inputs but not the same impacts in some cases. Although if you look on a smaller scale, we're studying some places in New York City now, some places that were once creeks and salt marshes and still are, but are heavily developed and still are habitat for some of the fish that, for instance, whales are now feeding on off of Manhattan. And there are these extraordinary pictures of whales feeding on these small fish right off with the skyline of Manhattan in the background. Fantastic. And yet we've kind of sucked the life out of some of these little creeks by overloading them with this kind of pollution. Interesting.
Thank you, Dan Shapley from Riverkeeper. You're listening to Healthy Ulster Radio. Today's discussion is about water quality and watershed protection. We'll be back after this.
The excitement continues to build. The mission of Health Alliance is now made even stronger by our new partnership with the Westchester Medical Center Health Network. By combining a legacy of community-based care with WMC Health, we are building a stronger, healthier, and more vibrant community. We'll be collaborating to provide preventive, primary, specialty, and advanced care right here where you live, where we all live. Health Alliance and WMC Health, advancing care here. Visit HAHV.org to learn more.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthy Ulster Radio. Today's discussion is water quality and watershed protection, and our guest is Dan Shapley, Water Quality Manager from the Riverkeeper organization. Dan, can you tell us a bit more about the water testing program that's maintained by the Riverkeeper?
I'd be happy to. We're started around 2008 with our patrol boat. I mentioned kind of the origins of Riverkeeper, and one of the things that we brought to the river was a boat that patrols up and down from New York Harbor all the way now up to Fort Edward and out the Mohawk River as far as Rome, New York. So we are on the water, and one of the things that does is allow us a platform for science. So we were able to start to answer a question that we were getting very frequently from the public, which is, how's the water? And people weren't really asking, how are the sturgeon or anything about the health of the river. They really wanted to know, am I going to be okay if I jump in? Can I go enjoy this beautiful water? And there wasn't data at that time to really answer the question, so we set out to start to gather it. And that has led to what is really the most extensive community science project going in the region. And we have now over 300 locations, 350 locations a month that we are sampling with the support of community groups and individuals, again, from Rome to Fort Edward, and even this month, or last month, as far as the Adirondack Mountains. So we really are trying to get data from as many places as we can. And what we're looking at is indicators of sewage contamination, essentially. The best way we have to do that is to look at bacteria in the water and measure it against limits that are thresholds that are set by the EPA to see when and where the water is safe for swimming and when maybe it's not safe for swimming. And we find overall in the Hudson River particularly that most times and most locations, the water is very good for swimming, meets federal guidelines for safe swimming. So that's really the good news, and the thing that people should know, that that Hudson River that has had a bad reputation for so many years is actually very often a wonderful place to swim from a water quality perspective. The change that we see particularly is when it rains. And again, going back to something I mentioned earlier, that the state of our sewer systems is such that we often are sending a lot of untreated sewage into the water when it rains. And that's either because the system was designed that way. Here, as we sit in Kingston, we have many sewer pipes that are combined, so they carry both stormwater and sewage. So you get enough rain, and they're designed to overflow. And those overflows occur in the Rondout Creek and in the Esopus Creek. And the city is working hard to correct that problem, to separate its sewer pipes. And there's a big construction project right now that you probably all drove through, as I did, to separate some of the pipes right on Broadway. Other problems also just occur when the aging pipes take on water, so they're not designed to do that, but they're still the net effect is kind of the same thing. So the real message for the public is, at this point, in many places, unfortunately, after rain, the water can be unsafe for swimming, and that's something that we want to see changed, because we're not just talking about the hour after swimming often, but it can stretch on for a couple days where we see the impact of that kind of water pollution. And then we also see that there's really not just one Hudson River. So we don't see, people always want to know, how's the Hudson, how's it doing? And when it comes to this type of pollution, what we're talking about, and it leaks from our sewer systems, it's really, how is Marlborough, how is Kingston, how is Poughkeepsie? It's really localized problems that we see more often than not. So that's where the data that we publish on our website can be useful to people. You can go to riverkeeper.org and click on the water quality tab and find your way to every piece of every water sample that we've taken and the results that we've gotten from it. And we try to present it in a way that's easy to understand. The important thing to know is that you want to look at overall patterns. So the last sample taken is not going to tell you what the water quality is today at any given location, but the pattern over time can tell you a lot. We see, for instance, that our data shows that the Rondout Creek in the tidal stretch here doesn't meet the same federal guidelines for safe swimming that Kingston Point Beach does, for instance. So Kingston Point Beach is a better choice of a place to swim based on our data than the Rondout Creek. Now, we just opened a branch office at the Hudson River Maritime Museum, and we have a wonderful window looking over the Rondout Creek. It's gorgeous. You look at it, and I want to jump in on a day like today. It's hot. And on many days, you would be perfectly safe jumping in. But we see that overall, we're not meeting those standards for safe swimming on the Rondout Creek often enough.
Well, one of the things that we do at the health department is to test the water at Kingston Point and the various permitted bathing beaches throughout the county. We test about 14 of them. And the thing that we test for, and you test for this as well, is the bacteriologic. Certainly, if someone has gotten enough of the contaminated water that's containing these bacteria, they can develop GI symptoms, diarrhea, and that sort of thing. So we do monitor that on a monthly basis for the permitted bathing beaches. And of course, ideally, we would love to aim for a time when you can swim at any point in the Hudson River and feel confident that it is safe and clean. But at least for now, and certainly, for our listening public, we also, do test those bathing beaches that we permit. So that's sort of a double testing system. I do see on your website that you very nicely describe the kinds of things you test for, the kinds of diseases that you can get from these different contaminants. But you also test for other factors like oxygen levels, turbidity, and those sorts of things that also give the overall quality water indicators, which is a good thing as well.
Yes, and we're able to gather so many samples really with the partnerships in the community. And in Ulster County and other places in the Hudson Valley, we have very strong partnerships with groups like the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance and the conservation advisory councils in many of the towns, the Lower Sopus Watershed Partnership. Groups like these really make the gathering of the data possible, and they also bring attention to the officials up in various agencies and elected officials as well, that people really care. I always say that those people who go out monthly and take a water sample, they're gathering data, but they're also casting a vote for clean water by taking that action.
Dan, we know that municipalities have a lot of work to do with their infrastructure, sewage systems, and whatnot.
Ben, you're going to start that question, get ahead of your pot, Dan. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Dan, we know that municipalities have a lot to do in terms of upgrading their infrastructure, but what about individuals that say may not be on a city sewer system? What can individuals do to do their part to protect the watersheds in the Hudson?
It's a great question, and before I answer it directly, I do want to say about the municipal systems that we worked really hard to address the funding problem, because it's obviously very expensive to invest in municipal sewer infrastructure. It costs a lot just to say that many syllables at once. But what we've done is really lobby in Albany over the last couple of years to establish a new grant fund. So now communities throughout the state can access grants to assist in those upgrades that are needed to infrastructure to help to clean the water. And there's $400 million that's been put into wastewater and water infrastructure. That's brand new grant money over 3 years that the governor and the legislature has committed. So we're very happy and grateful for that investment, and proud that our advocacy helped to contribute to the decision to commit that money. And any communities out there who aren't yet aware of it should really look into it, because it's helping a lot of places make those investments. On the individual level, one of the most important things in a county like Ulster County, where you have so many people living with their own wells and their own septic systems, is to make sure that you're really paying attention and maintaining that septic system. It's a kind of chronic problem that we know is out there, but is hard to measure just how extensive it is. But we know that a lot of systems are old, a lot are underperforming, a lot are probably failing. And when a system fails, then you can have the same type of health impacts that Dr. Smith talked about, affecting water quality downstream. So the pollution can flow through the soil and reach surface waters, reach creeks. And so one of the most important things people can do is take responsibility for those septic systems that are part of your home, and make sure that they're pumped out every 3 to 5 years is the general recommendation, and inspected. And if you have a problem with it, take the actions necessary to get it up to speed. And of course, the health department has some jurisdiction in regulating those and assisting homeowners if they have questions.
And how do individuals go about getting more information, or perhaps volunteering with Riverkeeper, or even contributing?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we do is really try to get people involved at the grassroots level. We're at heart a grassroots organization, and we like to demonstrate all the time that people really care. So one of the most important things you can do is join a local watershed group. I mentioned the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance, or there's a lot of activities that around Ulster Creek Week happens in September, and there'll be a lot of activities on the Rondout Creek and elsewhere in that month. So look for those opportunities to meet the individuals who are already active. They're the ones who know best what direct actions you can take and how to get involved. There's just endless opportunities. And what I've found, going back to why I got involved in this work in the first place, is the people involved are wonderful, and it keeps you going to always see the same faces and to make friends out of these groups, because there really are great people working on these issues.
Thank you, Dan. We really enjoyed this opportunity to speak with you and to hear about all of the wonderful work that you and your colleagues are doing to help protect the health and well-being of the people of not only Ulster County, but the entire Hudson Valley and the entire Hudson River watershed area. We hope that you'll come back and give us an update on a regular basis. Thank you, Dan.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. That's all the time we have for today's program. If you'd like to contact us with questions, comments, or for more information, send an email to healthyulsterradio@gmail.com. Please tune in next week for more ways to help keep you and your community healthy and strong with Healthy Ulster Radio.
You've been listening to the Healthy Ulster Radio Show, a community affairs presentation from the Ulster County Health Department, sponsored by Health Alliance of the Hudson Valley in Kingston, a member of the WMC Health Network. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us for another edition of the Healthy Ulster Radio Show next week.